Welcome, everyone. I'll just, for the record, I will introduce you again. Michael Widowitz, Boston Consulting Group, and Przemek Poppe, Boston Consulting Group. I'm Katarzyna Dębek from Forbes magazine. Gentlemen, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence today. Can it make teams happier? I must say, when I found out I will moderate this discussion, I was really excited because we've covered artificial intelligence and digital transformation a lot recently in the media. And the thing is, it's been kind of one-sided. We've been writing about the adoption of state-of-the-art technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning on the one hand, and didn't really mention the human factor in all of this. Whereas your research shows that this human factor is actually paramount. And that when we skip this human factor, the digital transformation might just not succeed. In your recent study, it showed that 90% of companies, out of 90% of companies that actually go through digital transformation, only 10% succeed. So what does this 10% do right, Michael?
Yeah, it's surprising at first stage, I can imagine. And it's great to be here and talk about this a bit. So basically what we have found out and repeatedly confirmed in our work is something that we call very simply the 10-20-70 rule. And we talk about 10% of success being due to superior algorithms, better technology, smart new ways of doing artificial intelligence, what you would usually expect within that. Then comes another 20%, which is something like the tech and data foundation. So what systems do you run, what computers, what software, what platforms, how do they talk to each other, all of that. Still just 20% for that. And now comes the big 70%, which is the effect of changing something as a result of the first two things. Changing the way you do business, changing the way you interact, changes in processes really. Now what we find out is that companies that are really successful in using all of those great new technologies that we have these days are really, really good at setting the right priorities here. So what this means is that you can, it's great fun to come up with the latest and greatest algorithm and kind of tweaking the last bit out of the data. It's just fun and it's rewarding and all of that. But in the end, it's relatively meaningless if you don't manage to actually put this into practice in some way. And that's why the 70% of the process and people change that you need to take into account.
So does artificial intelligence make teams less or more human?
That's a trick question, isn't it? Yeah, well, I would argue it makes them more human, and that's also what we found in our study. But let me explain a bit why I come to think that. I know from conversations that people sometimes are a little bit afraid of change and of artificial intelligence as such, like, overtaking us and will it replace humanity and all of that. To some extent, of course, there is a case that AI can do things that humans have been doing formerly, but I believe deeply that this is a good thing. And if you think back like 100 years ago, nobody would have said like, I want to plow this myself with my labor and leave me alone with electricity, Now the question is, where are the limits of this and where's the end of it? What are the things that AI is not able to take over from humans? And I believe it's two things really. It's creativity and compassion. And these are things that are extremely human and very hard to replicate, or not possible to replicate. I would be as bold as to say that. And now the good news is that if everything else is kind of taken over by AI, let's say, then the humans can actually focus on the stuff that is more fun, more rewarding, more human, really. And that's why I think that if you use AI in the right way, you actually make it a more human place. Or if I can say it in a different way, we want to stop smart people from doing stupid things. Stop smart people from doing stupid things. What is stupid things? It's obviously repetitive, monotonous, always the same sort of stuff. Stupid in this sense does not have to mean that it has to be trivial. Yeah, it can be a doctor looking at carcinogens in some way and classifying them. It can be an engineer looking at bug reports and such. So it's not trivial. It requires education, but still it is repetitive and it can be taken over by AI. And if you can get rid of this, I think it's a good thing. You can then focus on the more rewarding stuff.
Okay. Przemek, let's talk about the 20% in this mix. You've just shown technology. You've assisted many companies in through digital transformation. You know how to do it well. So how can this 20% help? How do digital platforms help go through digital transformation?
I think regarding this 20% in technology, the critical here, and just what we see, is to build the whole infrastructure, your platform around the data, because the AI cannot work without algorithms, people, and the data. On the end, we are talking here about access to the data, liberalizing the data, taking the data, let's say, giving the data from IT technologies and IT teams, give it to the business, manage it, and then let's say build all algorithm and AIs on it. And this is all those successful companies who are, let's say, enablers and who are the first one, like Netflix, Uber, Google, they are all about the data and analytics. So this is what we see that successful companies who are doing. They are very often starting from rebuilding their special technology stack just for agile projects and AI projects, starting from defining the data in the platform. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And this is a center of the whole platform. This is what we see that. And we're also recommending to the customers to build something what is called data and digital platform, which somehow clearly identifies that in the middle of the company there's a data set, who is the fit for AI and using and all possible use cases.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to tell me step by step, what are the keys to success of this digital transformation? Just in short.
In short, there are, let's say, we identified in our second research that there are, let's say, 6 main reasons of which are, let's say, levers which should be used. First of all, it's about setting the target of the transformation, really setting the strategy, what you want to achieve when, and let's say defined, connected with a very good leadership, and let's say because it has to be the team who will be doing it. It needs to consist of your best people in the company, but also there has to be a full buy-in and full sponsorship from leadership on the highest and the mid-management level. So those are, let's say, about the people, the technology, and so on, and the leadership. Then we have next things. Stop thinking about waterfall approach, do it in agile, fast, very fast way to deliver the results, and also to give a bigger buy-in from your customers, but also internally from the team, because then the team will see that the change is happening, it's quite rapidly, and then the whole engagement is spinning up. Of course, like every strategy and every project is it's quite important, and it's very important to set the right KPIs, measure, verify if this is correct or it's not correct, if we are going in the wrong direction. But if we are doing it in agile way, then we have quite fast the responses, and we see how we are going regarding the projects and the initiatives we are doing. And of course, the last one is that you cannot do it without the technology today. And this is what we are saying, that to do it right, you need to use a technology which is business-driven, business-oriented, and sometimes owned by business. So those are the 6 main aspects who we see are the key success factors for successful transformation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michael. What are some absolute don'ts during the digital transformation? And maybe you could give us some examples of companies that did something right and succeeded, or those who made a mistake, because it's really best to learn from mistakes, right? We all know that.
Yeah, especially if you have the chance to learn from the mistakes of others, right?
Especially, yes.
Less painful. So yes, there's certainly things. I would say if I should highlight the one, let's say, biggest fundamental thing that I see just these days a lot is I believe that we are now really at a stage where we should stop discussing the if of such a transformation and moving into the how. Mm-hmm. And it may sound simple, but since these changes are so deeply rooted and they change so many things, it's actually quite logical in an organization you would find resistance to that, and this doesn't have to be in bad faith, you know. But still, it's such a fundamental change that you do to things and practices that have been trained for decades, and people just know how things worked well and used to function. Now, if you want to change this, you maybe don't want to break this all too much, and therefore we see a lot of discussions about, is it really worth it? Should we go there? What's the payback? How quickly is it? And so on and so forth. And I just think if you now fast forward a decade or two, or as a thought experiment, you just go back a decade or two when we did not have iPhones, if I remember correctly, and how much has happened ever since then. Now fast forward 20 years from now, the discussion whether or not you should invest into AI will seem completely ridiculous. And that's why I think it's about how should we do it. Now, about the how, what we see is that the big challenge these days lies in scaling. It's relatively easy to get one first prototype to work, to gather some data. You know, there's a lot of data available. You have the machines, you can rent them, you can use cloud for that. So kind of to have a first proof of concept is quite simple. But then you want to move into scaling, into maintaining it, into running it, into kind of building the second and third and fifth and 50th piece on top of that. And the first still should function and they shouldn't break and you should know what to do. So kind of this systematic scaling, I think, is a big challenge. And yes, this requires some fundamental investments because certain things need to be redesigned for this to work, but also it needs to work in parallel. So what I would recommend to not do is to first make a fundamental investment program of saying now for 2 years we are going to fix everything or build all the foundations or get all the data right. You know, this is not going to work. It needs to be iterative and step by step, but with a clear scaling mindset.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any examples from you?
I have, let's say, positive examples, because, for example, we were working in the past, like in 1 year or 2 years ago, for a customer who is from oil and gas from Europe. And the oil and gas business is rather, it's not, when you think about it, well, it's not super digitally enabled, so it's more or less, with the whole respect, to a little bit boring, you can say, yeah? But this player, which I'm not able to unfortunately say the name, this is number one digital player in technology, and he transformed the whole company, lowered the costs, improved the whole go-to-market strategy, and they are developing more and more in, let's say, digital technologies and digital offering, because the oil and gas market is also changing with electric cars and so on. We also have the famous example of one of the best personalization engine used by Starbucks, who is also using AI and the whole, let's say, processing all the data. So this is one of the next successful case, yeah?
Okay, gentlemen, so to wrap it up, because we're running out of time, in what way, coming back to our first question, in what way can AI really make teams happier?
So there's a virtuous circle that you can observe, and we have recently published a study on this. You can look it up in social networks. It's AI benefits, MIT Sloan and BCG. And there's lots of details in there. I will not summarize those, but just essentially 2,000 managers interviewed, asking for different dimensions of what is culture and happiness in an organization. And what you see is that there is this positive reinforcement going on if you manage to use AI to its benefit, to benefit of everybody involved. They can focus on the more rewarding pieces of work. Things become more effective. The high effectiveness brings its rewards. The culture of the organization starts to slowly and positively change. With this change comes a bigger embracing of additional technologies, and then you kind of have this ever ongoing thing. And what you see is, I mean, this study is really very, very strong in the results, because they have 4 dimensions that are being looked at of what makes up culture. And you see in companies that apply AI, that 97% of those companies, so all of them virtually, actually report a benefit in at least one of these dimensions. And half of the interviewed companies observe improvements in all of these dimensions. And I would say this is a strong pattern. You don't need to do lots of statistics on that and validity tests. You just see that very apparently there is a correlation. And since we also understand the root causes behind, we can be confident to believe that this actually works.
Okay, it's a very optimistic result, I must say, and it seems like AI is not going to kill and eat humans, but actually cooperate with them quite successfully, right? So thank you very much for this discussion, gentlemen. I hope companies will include human factor in digital transformation in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.